Hey guys, this is Solution PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Green Through by another fucking Robin. This is Chapter 24. Jason Todd is a worrier. People often forget that about him, getting distracted by his abrasive nature and homicidal tendencies, but it's true. Always has been. He worried when he was little, worried about his dad, about why he was so angry, and why hugs never seemed to fix it. He worried about his ma, about what she saw when her eyes went glazed and her head lolled back and she stared at the ceiling for hours. He worried about who was hiding in the dark and about when his next meal would be, and about the fast approach of winter. He's always been a worrier, and that turned him into a planner, a strategist. He learned to be sneaky, to pickpocket, and jack tires. That's one of the only things that has stuck with him. Through death and through rebirth, the contingencies and the plans. Jason isn't mindlessly violent. He's always been a planner. That isn't to say that his return to Gotham wasn't brutal, because it was. But it was also carefully choreographed, right up until the final showdown. Each variable accounted for, each decision expected, well, most decisions. People often underestimate him in that regard. They forget that Jason Todd was never some misunderstood, manipulated weapon. Jason has always known what he's doing, always planned and calculated and schemed. Nothing that he has done has been a product of circumstance, but a meticulously orchestrated dance. He could have blown up the Batmobile the first day he was back in Gotham, could have shot the Joker through the bars of his papier-mâché prison 100 times over, but he didn't. He waited and watched and stalked like a predator on the hunt, almost comical in the sheer amount of plans he concocted. They forgot because they still foolishly cling to the memory of the boy he once was, still kid themselves into believing that their precious Robin is still alive somewhere inside him. They can't accept that their birdie was broken and shattered by the swing of a crowbar, mutilated by wound after wound, that their birdie died in Ethiopia. Red Hood isn't a ghost or a memory. He's a fury. A spirit of vengeance and blood who drags the deserving down into the depths of hell. He is Robin's scar tissue. His blood and his screams and his pain. Red Hood is the man who could have saved him from the manic laughter and broken bones. Red Hood wasn't there in that warehouse, and Jason Peter Todd is dead. He has been for a very long time. But just because he is undeniably a different person, a different man to the bruised boy who died alone and afraid, it does not mean that he is suddenly incapable of worry. Because here Jason is, anxiously tapping his platform combat boots. Having 4 inches on Batman will never not be worth it. On sticky wooden floors, trying to make out Bronte's words through the green that creeps through his vision like rot. He closes his book in frustration and checks his phone again. 4 a.m., just like last time. You see, Jason is still a worrier, still a planner, so when he encounters a kid like Peter, a child who defies all probabilities, Jason is bound to become invested. Peter's small and skinny. He has the gaunt face and brittle bones of a street kid. Jason remembers how his collarbones and ribs stuck sharply out of his skin in that back alley, just as much as he remembers how the kid managed to knock him over easily, how he outran Nightwing, how his handprints are permanently indented into a foot-thick steel door at the bottom of Gotham Harbor. Peter's kind and sweet, curiously making conversation with him in the bar, befriending Red Hood and Oracle and Nightwing, and yet he has the pit in his veins, grave dirt in his lungs, green in his eyes. Peter Parker is a walking contradiction, and at the same time, he makes perfect sense. If Jason's being completely honest with himself, Peter reminds him of the second Robin, the boy who flew between buildings and snarked at villains, the boy who had magic, and that's fucking terrifying. Because the second Robin died, because faith and joy and magic are so much more fragile than he ever knew, because the price is so much steeper than he'd ever dreamed. Because Red Hood hadn't been there in that warehouse, and the second Robin is dead. He had been for a very long time, but Red Hood is here now, and he isn't going to let another boy die. There is, however, a teensy wrench in that particular plan, in the form of Jason not knowing where the fuck said boy is. Which is why he's in the speakeasy again, hoping that he'll hear the door scrape across the blunt wooden floor, and Peter's loud, bounding footsteps cross the threshold. But with every passing second, the hope grows slimmer and slimmer, and he feels his vision becoming greener and greener. Even though Red Hood owns these parts, shit still happens. Deterrents like the threat of murder only work if you're sober or sane, a category which an alarmingly low number of the people in the alley fit into. And it seems like Peter not showing up is out of the norm. If Stevie's nervous conversation with Carmen and constant glancing at the door is anything to go by, Anything could happen to him. He could have been shaved and be bleeding out in a back alley right now. Jason none the wiser, sipping on his whiskey. And the stupid thing is, he doesn't even know what he'd do if the kid did show up. Peter doesn't know the civilian identity, not really. They met literally yesterday. The identity that Peter knows best is Red Hood, and even then they've only met 3 times, one of which the kid probably didn't even remember, seeing how out of it he was. They're practically strangers. Oh my god, he's been such a creep. What is he doing? Jay, Carmen interrupts his train of thought. You work for Hood, right? She's not wrong. You see, Jason Peter Todd might have died in that explosion, but Jason Austin Conway is alive and well. His current civilian identity is a low-level grunt for Red Hood, just high enough up in the pecking order that the newbies ask him questions about the way Red Hood works. Oftentimes incriminating questions about his policy on kids and prostitutes. One that gets them a bespoke beatdown and a lifelong limp. Just low enough that no one pays him any attention, and no one thinks he's a snitch. He clears his throat, trying not to look like he's been eavesdropping and/or spiraling. Yeah, why? Stevie shoots Carmen a nervous glance, but the bartender has a determined set to her jaw, and obviously isn't going to back down. You remember the squirt who was chatting you up about Chibuk last night? He nods. Well, he's missing, and I thought that Hood would want to know, seeing as he's the only one who gives a shit about the alley kids. Can you tell him for us? All your drinks will be on the house for the rest of the night. Jason resists the urge to facepalm. He's such a fucking idiot. Why has he been holed up in this bar for hours when it's clear that the kid's a no-show? When he could have been out on the streets as Red Hood, tracking the squirt down the old-fashioned way. Jason himself might not have an excuse to be out looking for Peter, but Red Hood does. Red Hood could be out there right now patrolling, and if he doesn't find the kid, then he'd have at least made the alley marginally safer. Where the fuck did Jason Todd the tactician go? He stands abruptly, his stool scraping loudly on the floor. Yeah, who'd want to know about him? You got a full name? The kid introduced himself to both Jason and Red Hood as Peter, but if he's going by another name with the alley kids, or the gangs and the shelters, then it'll be a real pain to track him down. The two looked between each other, protective suspicion radiating off of both. Nah, he's a smart kid. First name only, but I'm not sure if it's an alias. He stares at them pointedly. Well, Peter. He said he's called Peter. Jason nods at Carmen and leaves the speakeasy, an ignored weight hanging over his shoulders. Joker recently escaped Arkham. It's a weird night in the alley. The wind rips through his jacket and there's a foreboding heaviness in the air that speaks of an oncoming storm, but the alley is quiet. There's no screaming, no gunshots, no sirens. Not that the shitty police or ambulances ever step foot into this side of the spring, but usually their sound will carry across the river. That's not to say that it's silent, far from it. Back alleys echo with quiet chatter between gang members, wind howls around corners. Pigeons roost in gutters and rats scamper through the streets. But the foggy sense of suffering that usually permeates the alley has subsided slightly. It makes Jason feel off kilter, like his whole world has been shifted a couple millimeters up, and he's stuck missing an imaginary last stair on the staircase. He growls through his modulator. There is some sort of electric charge in the atmosphere, and Jason doesn't know what it's leading up to. But he reads enough books to recognize the pure fucking foreshadowing in the air. He lets a frustrated sound rip through his throat and shakes his head as if to clear it, of his slowly spiraling thoughts, and leaps off the overhang he's been leaning over, and onto the nearby building. He has a baby bird to catch. The baby bat in question has, unhelpfully, flown the coop. The post that he left last time the brat stood him up is on the exact same spot it was when he left it on the rooftop last night, looking remarkably unchanged, save for being slightly dampened by Bowery slime, and there are no heat signatures bigger than a rat's in the whole bookshop. He rolls his eyes and hopes to hide his worry. It doesn't work. Instead, questions well up inside him, filling every nook and cranny of his being, rushing in like cold seawater. Where is he? Why hadn't he seen the note? Why was he up so late last night? Is he safe? Why isn't he here? And why can't Jason think? The green at the center of his bones simmers in frustration, in inadequacy, and worry. But he can't afford to drown in those feelings, no matter how much he wants to wallow in them. Because the redhead has a fucking job to do. He matters to the people of the alley, the girls he walks home and the kids he saves from trafficking rings. He makes a difference to the people in a way Batman never could. Because they know the Hood won't hesitate to defend them. and, if need be, avenge them. Red Hood is important, integral to the safety of his home. He makes a goddamn fucking difference, a palpable, real one. When he takes out a threat, he takes them out permanently. No bail bullshit, no corrupt cops. He makes fucking sure that when he deals with a rapist that they won't ever rape again. As Red Hood, Jason can make a difference for the first time in his life. Robin did nothing. Batman does nothing. How can a motherfucking vigilante trust the justice system to deal with crime? The whole point of there being vigilantes is that the justice system failed. By handing over maniacs like Joker and Crane to a prison, he's just perpetuating an idiotic game of cat and mouse that leaves homes in ruins and people dead. Like hell is Jason letting his people get caught in the crossfire. So he pushes down his worry and his anxiety and slathers it in righteous, protective fury. He exhales through his nose, feeling warm breath bounce against the padding of his helmet and blow back into his face, and grapples off of the bookshop. He'll never leave a child alone and undefended. Every person, every child in the alley, in his alley, is under his protection. Jason isn't going to repeat Bruce's mistakes. The alley is buzzing tonight, which is to be expected. What with the penitents cartel being forced to clear out of the town a couple days ago, when Jason busted their headquarters. He did all he could to not leave a power vacuum in their wake, but he knew that it wouldn't be perfect, no matter how hard he tried. And as a result of becoming the only major cartel, Escobedo and his men are out in full force, trying to get rid of rival stragglers too stupid to get the hell out of Dodge. Penguin's goons are also scrambling to secure penitents, buyers, and territory, and all the petty criminals are coming out of the woodwork to try to take advantage of the chaos. All in all, it isn't a quiet night for the alley or Red Hood, which means that on top of his Peter hunt, Jay is making the rounds tonight. His first stop is Martha's house, the only shelter in the whole goddamn Bowery that isn't a front for trafficking. He drops down in front of the door, reeling in his grapple as he falls, and landing with a deceptively soft oomph. He then extracts his set of keys from one of the inside pockets of his jacket and unlocks the door for himself. Clara gives him a tired wave as he enters, and he gives her a curt nod in return. This is normal for the volunteers and the residents of the shelter by now. The crime lord drop-ins. He's got to make sure that the kids aren't disappearing, that the kitchen is fully stocked, and that no one is causing trouble. Tonight is no different. He makes silent rounds in between bunks, cataloging the kids he spots and noting all the ones he doesn't. Nora's cuddling her backpack, Sam is snoring lightly, Arthur is clutching protectively onto Kat. Penny and Sasha are missing, too young for straight corners, but not too young to be out working someplace else. Charlie isn't here, but he'd recently befriended Finn and Mike, and they're still squatting in the fire station, so he shouldn't be too worried about them. All the other kids are either in the system or should have some semblance of a roof over their heads, or are probably at Sherwood Den. He slips some energy bars and cash into the rucksacks and continues his movements up and down the aisles of beds. There are a couple of people awake, most of them sweating and shaking from withdrawals, too lost in shivers to notice he is there. But others definitely notice, like Sally, who waves at him with one hand while rocking her baby back and forth with the other. He makes his way over. "Take him for me?" she whispers, looking up hopefully with weary eyes. I swear my arm's about to drop off. Sure thing, Sally. Thank you so much, she sighs, handing the bundle over. You got a name for him yet? Nah, not yet, she says, shaking her arm out to try and rid them of the pins and needles. Didn't think we'd make it. Didn't have one prepared. Don't got time to think of one now. Jason glances at the baby in his arms, pudgy cheeks and feather-soft hair and eyes that haven't even opened yet. He refuses to believe he was ever so small. He's the size of one of Jason's hands, for Christ's sake. He's a cute little guy, isn't he? She smiles at him, watching the way his gloved fingers stroke the spot between the baby's eyebrows. She makes a grabby gesture for her son. Jason hands him back somewhat reluctantly. That he is, Sal. That he is. She chuckles as Jason leaves the shelter, oblivious to the bills he tucked in the baby's blanket. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 24 of Green Through and Through by Another Fucking Robin. I hope you guys liked it, and we'll see you next chapter.